fucking pathetic, and then people were so entitled and overprivileged that they think that it's fucking
options to remove lanes and
great.
quieten the street that were
Fucking
physically
useless
impossible
idiots.
before. People are kind of
It's
funny when
fucking
they say
stupid.
scar. Even though the REM line for this street is only a 2-carriage configuration, it's still going to be efficient enough to reduce this 8-lane urban highway down to a 4-lane normal street. It's going to be a lot nicer. I'll put it this way. I'm jealous of the people who bought property on this road a couple of years before the project was announced. But no matter what, the physical appearance of viaducts are an instant rejection from many. And these systems do make noise on corners. So if you can't go over it, many suggest that the case could go under it. But if it was to be tunneled, one of two things will happen. Either the government pays the massive amount of money to tunnel deep into downtown, or the numbers don't work and the case doesn't do the project. There are a lot of tunnels on the project. They don't have a problem with tunnels. They have a problem with extremely expensive and time-consuming tunnels. Knowing this reality, many have suggested setting up surface-level operations just for the downtown segment.
Already there,
now, the REM's secret sauce is that it's automated, which gives it super low operating costs and more frequent and flexible services. So if there's a festival being held in the east of Montreal, which you'd actually be able to hold now, the traffic can be handled with the push of a button to dispatch some extra trains.
Oh, just wait.
It's totally geared to the modern reality of decentralized cities and remote work. A smaller, more frequent, and flexible conveyor belt sort of transit. But all of this depends on it being completely separated from traffic. The network is only as good as the weakest section. When exposed to these at-grade transportation problems, trips become slower, transit becomes worse, and the entire commuter conveyor belt stops when, say, a protester decides to park on the tracks. And we are literally making the choice to have people every year just straight up die. On top of it being a worse experience, you just added a workforce of 100 drivers. So again, the financials don't work and the project gets cancelled. So you might notice that I'm getting a little irritated. And that is because this is what people don't get. All of this bullshit right here has happened so many times before. And it is why we don't get transit. What sucks with NIMBYs is that we're all heroes of our own narrative, right? And in theirs, they're fighting some evil corporation or the government, but they don't realize that what they're doing is blowing the brains out of any transit project. Well, I just wanted to be consulted. Well, I live on the line. I've been to meetings. I got this in the mail. I had my questions answered. And I was like, okay, well, not exactly what I want, but overall, this will make my city a much better place to live in for all the other people that live here, not just me. By not consulted, what they mean is they didn't get what they wanted. They wanted them to bury it or move it away from them or reduce the frequency or whatever other kick in the guts that maybe a few blocks of people could ask for, but block after block, kick after kick, they beat the project to death. They invoke shamefully the language of low-income neighborhoods that were demolished by 60s highway projects when they say divided and scar. And they dare to compare their experience with a fully permeable couple of meter wide viaduct, which is going to supply transit that they take for granted to the modern equivalent low-income communities of today in Montreal North and Montreal East. As a reminder of what a real scar looks like, the REM happens to be using this stretch of green space that was a highway demolition project back in the day.
Oh, really?
A highway that was never built, thankfully. Unlike the victims of the past whose homes once stood here, the REM is going to be demolishing basically nothing. The REM actually coincides with the city's plans to finally see it landscaped into a usable park. And that park will feature a modern, quiet transit system running through it. If anything, to me, this all looks like learning and finally healing the scars from the past. The project recently moved a large section in response to public complaints about it running down a commercial street. They negotiated a deal and moved it to an existing rail corridor that actually takes heavy, long, and loud freight trains. And even then, immediately, a new group of NIMBYs sprung up. These are people that bought a house on a freight train line, and they're unhappy about the vibrations from this humming electric train using it. So you might ask, why isn't it pragmatic to just adopt the strategy of caving in and giving them what they want? Well, we can see how that's going at the blue line, which actually will intercept with the red. This 5-station, 5.8 kilometer long extension has been slowly working its way through various hurdles since the 1980s. It's suffered setback after setback because it's a typical, time-consuming, completely tunnel, manually operated East Coast transit project currently estimated at $6.9 billion. If the case was asked, would you build this tunnel metro extension? They would probably say no, because they're building a 67-kilometer long, 26-station network for the same price. They would only do this if they could do things like cut and cover or automate the line to bring down the long-term overheads, which would drop the price, but both things would trigger protests. This is one of the biggest lessons to learn from REM, and it doesn't even require the case in its cashed-up public-public partnership model. Their other innovation in Montreal is simply avoiding slow, expensive projects. In transit infrastructure, taking a long time is usually just another way of saying expensive. They're expensive because they are literally tens of thousands of hours more work. So the REM was planned to be built quick and therefore cheap, and therefore, unlike the blue line, it actually fucking exists. Whereas with the slow expensive, they enter
blue line is just the line of sadness.
So they have years of planning and years for the public to find out about them and neurotically worry about the project. Inevitably, in a city of millions, someone goes, "Hey, I'm worried about the vibrations and their effects on my baby." Otherwise, for politicians to approve, it's already pretty expensive, and citizens are already writing letters. The transit agency is
kids are too dumb. If your kid needs to be on a leash to keep it from jumping into traffic, maybe it was just was not meant to be. Just saying.
Get tunnels added. It goes back to the government, even more
That's why your
expensive.
kids are so stupid, because you put them on leashes.
Politicians weigh in with ridiculous ideas. The transit authority capitulates.
We did not need to be leashed. We were afraid to die from our parents' hand. If you run in front of cars and not die, well, you might literally die from your parent beating you to death. Because don't be fucking stupid and useless and in the way.
Drivers have to wait at crossings. Why weren't they consulted? Back to government. Now, with quantifiably ludicrous numbers, the representatives of suburban voters ask, couldn't we solve this better with buses? What about 15 buses?
Oh my god, no, there's not just 15 buses though.
To extend the winning streak on the first REM. But no surprise, they hit more traditional transit problems. With the first stage of a REM, people in Montreal were just so happy to have anything built that even the NIMBYs had their benchmarks under lock and key. I don't like it. Shut up. I hate the airport bus. But by the time the REM-S was proposed
the airport bus, you have no idea.
Everything had changed. The NIMBYs laying 90 million kilometers of track.
Alright, I think the airport
excuse to be selfish, and as always, drowned out and freaked out the silent majority of their neighbors that would benefit from a world-class transit system finally linking the whole island. Thousands of NIMBY kicks and punches meant the case's once unblemished exterior had started to take some damage. With so many perfectly reasonable multi-million-dollar demands piling up, the unaware public didn't realize how much the project edged towards cancellation. Yet another North American transit project that was not fully realized because, sadly, it turned out to be too expensive when we looked into it. But the damage was still bearable, provided, of course, 2022 passed without any serious blows.
What?
It didn't.
YUL? Oh. Please don't talk like that whole wow, that's appreciate it. Okay, please stop for you. Okay. Oh, really? Okay. Let me talk. You know, I want you to talk it through it. Can you get her ass out of my face, please?
experience the delicious intensity of Excellence dark chocolate, crafted with passion by the mint nature
You're gonna get
chocolatier.
fat. No one likes fatties. Please, just let me fucking die. What is... No. No. Oh, jeez. Linda, you're so sad. This is so creepy and awkward. Wait, LPT?
Imagine that a building is going in next door to you. It can be clad in one of these common materials. If you had to choose 3 that you liked and 3 that you disliked, which ones would they be? Engineered wood, concrete, limestone, metal, clay brick, vinyl, stucco, natural wood, concrete, brick, or glass.
Hey everybody.
I surveyed my audience and found that people have very clear preferences when it comes to building material. The first trend is people like traditional materials, clay bricks, wood, and limestone. Meanwhile, only 14% said glass, 13% said concrete brick, and the plastic bricks, the royal reproduction, the most fake of all, vinyl, but just 6%. But there is more to it than that. It also depends on what is already on your street.
Yeah,
Although only 6% of people list vinyl as one of their favorites, if their street already has mostly vinyl housing, people would prefer more than doubles to 14%. In my town, the existing housing stock is often made from limestone and brick. That creates a very strong preference amongst people who live here. A natural building material? Like it. That matches the rest of the street. Oh, love it. 83% of people listed clay brick as one of their favorite building materials, and only 2% said that it was one of their least favorite. People love clay brick.
She's like fucking dying. Okay. Can you live your actual best life as an Anglo in Montreal? Absolutely not. I'm glad we've acknowledged that if you were born into an English family, well, fuck you. Should have known. Just like this fucking computer. Fashion over function. Should have known. Sorry, my bad. I thought we made fucking technology to be... I don't know. Whatever. Fuck it. Stupid. Oh, I haven't seen any of these. Oh my god. Yeah! Oh, it's fucking...
Deep in the heart of Montreal,
It's so great.
old tunnels being used for trains from the past are being restored.
Wait. Where is
Deep
that?
in the heart of
Montreal. Fucking hate that shit. Okay. Yep.
It's March 2018. Commuters on Montreal's... In 2000,
Oh my god, you gotta be kidding me
the
though.
Montreal Tunnel closed to Deux-Montagnes commuters for a large
I hate everything. I hate everything about
deep
new
in the heart of
technology.
Montreal. The old tunnels being
1913 this is.
used for trains from the past are being restored. And a modern line is being built.
Bunch of fucking idiots. Oh, I'm so glad. Like, we have these massive projects. You can't even understand the people and not know how fucking stupid these people are. Like,
Battered metropolis. But the return to the subway scene of Montreal is more than just the system. It's also the way the system was built. So how did this have-not city, traditionally plagued with financial issues and corruption, achieve this? Well, the answer is innovation. No, not what you'd normally think of. Management and financing innovation. During the financial crisis, the second largest pension fund in Canada, the CDPQ, or CASE, noticed something nerdy. While most of their investments had tanked with the rest of the market, their infrastructure investments had been rock solid. The pension fund was heavily invested in Vancouver's
helps
airport
when
transit
no
line
one's
being
using
built for the
fucking
Winter Olympics. It was a
public
public-private
transit,
partnership, and their role was the rich relative with money helping out their often troubled Quebec brother, SNC Lavalin, who were overseeing construction. The project went well.
Guess
The
I'm gonna
public
burn that
helped their
building
line,
down,
the pension
please.
fund started getting returns for
everybody in
Quebec's
it.
retirees.
Make sure
And most
Trudeau came into
Vancouverites
work.
don't even know that it's operated by anyone different to the other SkyTrain lines. That was a we should do that again, said their staff. So they decided to pick up some more infrastructure investments. But they were not alone. A lot of other large institutional investors had done well in infrastructure during the financial crisis too. And a limited number of investment spots in infrastructure was snapped up. I mean, most North Americans will agree we haven't been doing a great job of building infrastructure lately. There just weren't enough projects looking for a rich relative. The case picked up its money bags and headed home. But this is where something unusual happened. Because its home was Quebec. A province with an appetite for political ventures and unorthodox structures. The largest city of the province was Montreal, the town with several engineering and construction firms that had mostly allowed its transit to run on the fumes of its former glory. While Montreal had struggled with corruption, economic stagnation, and population decline, its peers had gradually taken the transit lead. In a meeting with the government, they learned that there was an interest in getting some long-dreamed-of transit projects done. But they didn't just sit around with their bag of money, waiting for some engineering firm to come knocking. They set up and staffed up an infrastructure division near the major construction and engineering players in downtown Montreal. A group of people that can manage a project, not just write checks. With the support of the Quebec government, they asked the various municipal and government stakeholders in Montreal what transportation problems they were looking to solve. They found out there was an interest in connecting the South Shore and the airport, as well as reducing the amount of traffic on existing metro lines. They also figured out what opportunities they had. The proposals for the new Champlain Bridge being built had light rail in the project. Could that be used? There were all these highways where people wouldn't mind cheaper above-ground infrastructure being built. And there were rail corridors that were underutilized. They also found out how much the government was paying for the bus and train services that currently solve the same transportation problems. They then put all of that together and came up with a better solution for the government at a better price than they were currently paying. It's kind of like if someone came to your street and asked you and your neighbors, how much are you paying for internet? And then they went away, figured out what it would cost to set up fiber optic, and came back to your house and said, okay, we can give you twice the speed for half the price if you and your neighbors all agree.
Nope.
It's pretty much that simple. Actually, it's not. It took like the better half of a decade to figure this all out, but that's the gist of it. So, as an example, in 2018, there was a heavy rail passenger line going to Deux Mountains with an average cost per passenger kilometer to the Transit Authority of 89 cents.
Yeah.
It would run 9 trains in the morning and afternoon from open platforms through the Montreal Tunnel to downtown. By retrofitting the existing tunnel and building down highways, they managed to come back to the city with a deal for a 20-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week automated line. Instead of 9 departures during rush hour, there are 40. People don't get to carefully plan their day downtown and make sure they get back to the station at a certain time before the last train leaves. They can just wait until bar close and head to an enclosed, now air-conditioned station. The train will show up in minutes. And what's best, instead of costing the government 89 cents per kilometer to operate, plus construction and new equipment costs, it costs them 72 cents, all included. This looks great. I mean, the only people who are unhappy with the train guys who dream of steam. In order to make the project happen, the case kept things on the down low as it negotiated with all the various parties. It needed expropriation laws in place to acquire land for stations, so those were passed in 2017. Believe it or not allowing companies building transit systems to acquire land is a common cause of project failure. A transportation tax was set up so that property developments within 1 kilometer of new stations would fund the existing regional transit authorities, the ARTM. The ARTM pays the 72 cents per passenger kilometer to the case. This kind of handed the long-term power over to the ARTM that comes with having the purse strings. They also had the task of giving feedback and integrating the REM into the existing transit systems. So what are the risks with this project?
Her tail and his face on purpose.
Wait a minute now. The project's $6.9 billion in funding comes from loans from the Quebec government, the federal government, and Hydro-Quebec. The case takes the largest stake and risk. For the average Montrealer and the city of Montreal, the project's cost doesn't really matter. It's kind of like being a renter in someone's house. I mean, it's interesting to know the house's value and price, but in the end, you just have to know that rent is 72 cents per kilometer. Your ticket on any transit is already highly subsidized, but less so on the REM. The costs, risk, and overruns are all mostly the case's problem, and a bit of the Quebec and federal government because they're supposed to get paid back one day too. But for the city, we just have to pay that subsidy, as per usual. If ridership ends up being very low, the case are the biggest loser. They're motivated to make the system as good as possible and get as many riders on it as they can. There is no minimum payment. If no one rides for REM, the city pays absolutely nothing. Although it's probably the end of the world, so I doubt people will be worried about transit project finance.
Oh my
God! As ridership increases, the price per kilometer the ARTM has to pay decreases. So we won't be punished as a city for growing and increasing our population. In fact, this incentivizes densification and growth.
Oh no!
And this is the thing which I think people, when discussing REM, always forget. If we as citizens ever feel ripped off, if it becomes an infamous, oh man, that thing, it sucks, we're stuck paying for it.
Yep.
The case is a pension fund created and regulated by the Quebec government. The law can be changed and the case can be forced to, say, sell off its assets to the city at a reasonable price. And if the city were to acquire it, even at a price twice that of construction, it would be a great deal. It was an incredibly efficient use of money on a system that will have a very low long-run operating cost. So go ahead and screw up, case. Really looking forward to getting our hands on that. Of course, the case don't want that to happen. They want to export this model and do it in other markets, which is not going to happen if they're infamous for screwing over their hometown. This grand vision to make Montreal a hub, not just for building our own transit, but for building other people's transit, is pretty wild. The case had a reputation for being a boring institutional investor, and when they started doing this, heads turned. There's something very Quebec about a state-owned enterprise with oddly huge ambitions to change society and the world. Bringing the conception stage vision and the money and management could make this pension fund, of all things, one of the most, if not the most formidable transit builders on the continent. The deal sounded good to all parties involved, and the final version was signed in 2018. With the proposal accepted, between the big names of government and industry, millions of citizens finally got a chance to see what had been decided on. And there were quite a few questions. One group with a lot of them were the millions of Quebec pensioners. Was this a good way to invest grandma's retirement money?
Asian tourists, whatever, they used to take pictures of me with and they used to just like point at me with my weird hair, I guess, and take pictures of me feeding squirrels.
We intend to go further. We intend to export this model.
Like, I'm not part of your tour.
Quebec is not alone in the world in needing to build new critical public infrastructure. Governments in the rest of Canada, in the United States, in Europe, all face the same needs and the same fiscal constraints. This model can and will help to meet their needs. And in so doing, it will open new markets of opportunity for Latinx, for our partners, and for our depositors.
When inspiration strikes, go after it. In the German,
please let your kid be a fucking skateboarder like fucking Tony Hawk.
2 expired passports from different countries.
Let's go back in videos, not forward, obviously.
Deep in the heart of It's March 2018. Commuters on Montreal's South Shore noticed construction work going on. Perhaps some roadworks, or one of the new condo projects. But it was the first preparatory work for the REM, the new 67-kilometer rapid
freaking
transit
out.
network.
Like, I'm really pretty upset about this.
This hypothetical project from Quebec's pension fund, the case, was suddenly very real. And so were the concerns.
Every fucking night, I go check on the fucking first aid to make sure that fucking they're not trying to tear it down. Bullshit, man. The Doomsday fucking Underground is bullshit.
Should Quebec's pensioners trust this project with their retirement? And then on the other side of the deal, would the younger urban folk benefit? Or was the private sector building fast, but privately pulling a fast one? Now, the private sector works with the government to build infrastructure all the time. Effectively, all transit systems are a deal between the government and industry. Even communist China can back up the building of subway lines. It's not like the guys spreading salt on the road are told at the end of winter, hey guys, time to start digging the subway, we'll bring the shovels. But this approach of contracting has obvious problems. The main one is management and accountability. Usually you have many companies doing small parts of project. The architecture firm designing stations, engineering firms, ensuring that it physically works, the supplier of trains and all the different construction companies building different parts of it. These projects are small cities of workers brought in from across the planet. And overseeing all of this, holding the public credit card, a group of government employees who often haven't seen a subway built in Recife for 30 years. During their heydays of growth, cities like New York, Paris, and London built a whackload of rapid transit at a reasonable price. They built good, practical, institutional knowledge about managing contracts. You know, what seems suspicious, what to expect. You get better with practice, and your contractors get better at working with you. All of this means prices come down. We seldom think about it because we do it so regularly, but this still happens with lots of infrastructure. We're pretty good at constructing roads and electrical grids and sewage systems at a reasonable price. The problem with mass transit is it needs higher densities to work, and cities run out of unserved high density at some point. The arrival of a car meant fertile, high-density soil for rapid transit projects stopped being produced altogether in many cases. They kind of hit peak project, people moved on to other tasks, and that institutional know-how was lost. That loss of production line efficiencies made any new shit really expensive. You can end up in a downward spiral where each project costs more, so less get built, so they cost even more, so even less get built. Recognizing various shortcomings, to their credit, governments have been trying to figure out how to handle this. One approach has been to make the private sector have more skin in the game as an investor. By getting the private sector to be financially on the hook, you reduce the public risk and increase the oversight. More parties want it to arrive on time and on budget, and they hold the various contractors to account and look for cost efficiencies. This arrangement is called a public-private partnership, or P3. Lots of these have been done, and although the idea sounded good on paper, they've been a pretty mixed bag. I found P3s horrible to research because the companies that want to do them and the left-wing think tanks that don't want to see government jobs getting outsourced have very strong opinions about the whole thing. P3s are the worst, and then they find like another, aligned left-wing think tank, and they're like, see, these guys also think they're the worst. And then you go to the industry side, and there's an entire separate alternative reality ecosystem of their think tanks being like, they're the best. Everyone should do these all the time. Anyway, here's my read for what it's worth. When the government realized that it had an issue managing construction projects, at first, a partnership with the private sector seemed like an easy solution. But they kind of swapped one shortcoming for another because they also weren't reality ecosystem of their think tanks being like, they're the best, everyone should do these all the time. Anyway, here's my read for what it's worth. When the government realized that it had an issue managing construction projects, at first, a partnership with the private sector seemed like an easy solution. But they kind of swapped one shortcoming for another because they also weren't very good at writing partnership agreements with the private sector. You'll notice places like the World Bank create extensive manuals on how to structure these partnerships nowadays. And I think over time, P3s have gotten better as the holes have kind of been plugged and best practices have been established. But the biggest problem with P3s that I don't see them getting past anytime soon is political. Even when the deal is fair, the public resent that the money coming off their infrastructure is going into the pockets of some company. I don't really like that my infrastructure is technically owned by this Saudi-linked private equity fund, which is understandable. And then sometimes, of course, the deal is just not fair. For-profit global corporations, shocker. They can be bad guys. We're talking bribes and corruption, shoddy work. So let's introduce the innovation that the case came up with that attempts to solve the enterprise gap while calming these concerns. They dorkily call it the public-public partnership. You see, the case benefits from its unusually close but legally separated relationship with the government. The case is an institution
wow.
publicly owned by Quebec, founded by the National Assembly in 1965. The government can work with them, lean on their expertise, and trust them more than they would a private company. It's easier to loan them money, and it's not lining billionaires' pockets, which helps with that uncomfortable feeling many get with traditional P3s. But they're still independent. Their mandate is first and foremost an 8-ish% return so grandma can retire. Interfering with the case means changing legislation and having a public debate. It's not as simple as a politician making a phone call and giving them marching orders to go buy my uncle's shovels for some project. However, the option to change those things is always there. They can make their returns and solve their problems, but shafting the public forever with bad infrastructure just isn't politically an option. If the deal is notoriously bad, a political party could run on amending the law and require the case to, say, divest the assets to the city at a reasonable rate. That means the REM is a transit P3 with an emergency brake built into it. We live in a democracy, and all parties in this deal are ultimately accountable to citizens if we want it. So that addresses a lot of citizens' concerns, but the opportunity which gets me most excited is addressing the institutional knowledge problem. The case has money and permanent staff who plan and manage infrastructure construction. They aren't a cash-strapped government department that doesn't even have the money to put together a plan to ask for money. They also show up with cash. So it's like, here's a workable plan, here's half of the cost. For example, there have been several cost increases during the first REM project. A fun one was due to old explosives detonating in the Montreal Tower.
Oh my god, are you
Who was going to pay for that? The case. Who is motivated to make sure it doesn't happen again? The case. It's their problem to solve, their shortfall to make up for, but critically, it's become their lesson to learn for pricing the next project that involves old infrastructure. And that is a big change here. Any given city in the country doesn't have a limitless set of transit to build. But overall, across 10 cities, there effectively is enough work for some shared institution, a well-oiled Canadian machine with tens of projects under its belt that multiple cities can tap into. This is potentially the post-industrialization project manager that we've been looking for. REM in Montreal isn't some do-bias project. The government didn't open a briefcase of money and see who would drop by to build the thing. Oh, thanks. See you next decade for the next tunnel, guys. It's a project that aims to kickstart an industry. Instead of taking old money and making them richer, it's taking old people's money and enriching their society. So yeah, in Montreal, boomers should love transit. Even if you don't ride it yourself, you'll know people who are, and your pension is helping to build a new industry for the city's future. But the case, making a good return, all depends on how the project goes. The preparatory work in 2018 was just some marks in the ground. The real challenge will show up later that year when the political bulldozers arrive and undermine the integrity of the entire enterprise.
But like now if you go into the Cafe Ridge, it's fucking empty. Like literally, it's empty. I think like this is was the rush hour during for like an hour. They're the only one who has like fucking actual rush hour anymore. Because apparently fucking by 2:00. 2:00 is when traffic starts now. I was like, oh, it must seem nice that you guys all fucking have bosses that let you out of fucking work early, right? Like, you guys just like go until lunch and just fuck the rest of the day work or some shit. Like, it's 2:00 and everything's already fucking starting to fucking clog up. Are you fucking kidding me? Don't tell me that's fucking progression.
It's March 2018. In 2018, the major infrastructure project, Pont Samuel de Champlain, was nearing completion. And the renders of the new transit system crossing the bridge drew a lot of attention, including the surging CAQ political party. 2018 was an election year, and Jean-François Roberge was on the campaign trail in Chambly.
I think the First Nations
southwest of Montreal. The governing Liberal Party had held power for the majority of the last 2 decades, and under them,
I would literally be willing to pay a fucking toll at a toll booth to use Mercier Bridge if it meant the Native people are allowed to, or First Nations people are allowed to fucking fix that shit and fucking die.
It seemed to the CAQ it was time to talk about running this magical, rapidly progressing train into their swinging heartlands. The 30,000 residents of the small town nestled next to their namesake river basin were made the full-barrel promise of the political season as their representative, Jean-François, stepped up to the microphone at a campaign stop and proclaimed, "Es notre premier mandat, les rêves du REM seront
Like, a couple of years or whatever, like, I get there was that local crisis thing that happened with the bridge, which is very controversial, but you know what? It seems like fucking. If you want shit built, let the First Nations people build it, because they will literally climb like, stories high without a harness. Like, and they will just, like, la-di-da be walking on fucking, what do you call it, scaffolding and shit? Just, like, they'll fucking get shit done. Fucking 10 fucking solid years of fucking, you've never heard of the good in the bridge, like, I'm just like, oh my fucking god, are you kidding me? I can't wait to sit in hours and hours and hours and hours of traffic for this fucking bridge again. I really, like, I'm super stoked. It's just the best. Just fucking, oh my god. I just can't believe how much we're, like, oh, did you know the Victoria Bridge is closed for whatever? Like, I mean, what? It was, like, my secret little bridge. Because everyone was too afraid to take it. Because there's a little weird tunnel thing that everyone's just like, oh my god, I'm gonna fucking crash my car into the fucking wall. And I'm like, yeah, great, please, we do that. But now apparently we're fucking gonna be fucking with the Victoria Bridge now. Yay! Even though this fucking Champlain Bridge is goddamn empty. Oh, and the fucking, what is it, $3 billion we put on the lights on the fucking Jacques Cartier? Fucking so goddamn dumb.
Digital Montreal ended up connecting a lot of ridings that voted Team Red. It seemed to the CAQ it was time to talk about running this magical, rapidly progressing train into their swinging heartlands. The 30,000 residents of the small town nestled next to their namesake river basin were made the pork barrel promise of a political season as their representative, Jean-Francois, stepped up to the microphone at a campaign stop and proclaimed, "Des notre premier mandat, les rêves du REM seront installés pour desservir Chambly." The case was now dealing with the first of many political meddling moments. For the case's public-public partnership to work, the numbers still had to make sense. And with a population of 3 cows and 2 chickens, Chambly put them in a very awkward spot. Because the Quebec government gives billions of favorable financing support to the case. So when they ask, hey, look into this, the case are obliged. It's polite. And those leads are formally the way that they are supposed to investigate these new projects. But are they actually forced to do what a politician yells at 2 bored reporters in a hardware store car park?
What? Oh my god. Look at it, it's turning light blue.
The original REM came from the government requesting the case look into it.
So many things. So many things. All the things. Hey, I'm so sorry, I just want to listen. God damn it! Wait, what?
The case are obliged. It's polite. And those leads are formally the way that they are supposed to investigate these new projects. But are they actually forced to do what a politician yells at 2 bored reporters in a hardware store car park?
I get you over that. Can I?
What a politician yells at 2 bored reporters in a hardware store car park?
Look at it,
Yo,
The original REM
fucking-
came from
who the fuck was that? That was fucking amazing.
the government requesting the case look
Yeah,
into an airport
so
connection and a
good.
South Shore connection. The case took it and, well, ran with it would be an understatement. Prescribing exactly what to build is a big problem with existing projects under PPs and the regular old contract to build model. By empowering the case to think big picture about the problem, they find efficiencies and opportunities that they wouldn't have if it was a prescriptive old style, build this station here. We want the frequency to be exactly this. You have to use this sort of train. But these riding space demands are a potential issue for getting decent projects in the first place. In our electoral system, suburban swing ridings are squeaky wheels to politicians and subsequently get more grease. But that becomes a big problem for something like public transportation. Public transit, by default, operates on the population-based reality of the world. Maybe in our warped electoral system, land does vote, but it sure as hell doesn't ride the train, so the case started doing their due diligence, but suspected the small population of car-centric Chambly would not cover the costs of the line. Meanwhile, the CAQ were at it again, saying they would force the case to purchase trains from Bombardier, something that many, if not virtually all, previous transit projects have been required to do in Montreal, without really asking, can they actually deliver on this?
Nope.
Switching to Bombardier trains would have set the project back years. Bombardier makes good equipment, but they've been just awful at delivering on time in the decade leading up to the project.
You guys fucking
And
literally
Alstom,
bought
we're good
the
to go.
train for the
When
metro and
Bombardier
it
delivered the
didn't
Azure
fucking
trains or transit
fit.
streetcars late, at least the systems had aging but functioning vehicles.
I remember
For the
that.
REM, there was no interim solution.
Yeah, I remember when the fucking metro carts were all still like that icky ass blue. They were all individual fucking carts. They had all the main metros had a fucking sample of potential fucking metro carts that you could go and stand in and look around, and they were gonna, I guess, get the public's opinion on. This was probably in 2016 around, something like that, 2017 maybe. And yep, the one they picked did not fit in the fucking hole, so nobody checked that shit first. That's the kind of fucking planning and the kind of fucking leadership. Yeah. Didn't measure it. God, I'm an idiot.
Solution. We almost certainly were looking at having an empty track, not earning any revenue, with much less time to iron out the bugs on the brand new system.
How we
they
do.
needed the vehicles years ahead of opening. No train in 2020, no REM in 2022.
Yeah.
The case bothered a lot of Bombardier, and it still decided that Alstom trains were a right choice. These political demands have always muddled the mandate of existing transit agencies. They have to be thinking about political implications rather than what the best tool is for the job. Oh, let's put a transit line, and also we have to buy a kind of crappy shovel that will slow us down because the shovel lobby is big, and we have to run it to a place that happens to have the right people living in it for the politicians to care about them, even though there is a